General Hospital will reveal at the height of an increasingly bitter custody battle between Michael and Willow, Nina stood at a dangerous moral crossroads. One that tested not only her loyalty as a mother but also the very foundation of her conscience. Outwardly, she maintained the illusion of being a devoted and concerned parent. Someone who only wanted the best for her daughter and grandchildren. But beneath that polished facade, Nina was quietly harboring a betrayal so cold and calculated it would change the trajectory of several lives. She had seen firsthand the deceit that Drew had cloaked himself in, how he paid off a nurse to falsify records, manipulated narratives to paint himself in a favorable light, and ultimately pushed Willow into trusting a version of him that was nothing more than a fabrication. Nina knew the truth about Drew. She had uncovered the cracks in his image, witnessed the subtle acts of coercion and emotional control, and she understood with chilling clarity that this man was not the protector Willow believed him to be. And yet, despite possessing this damning knowledge, she chose silence. For a time, Nina had convinced herself that she would intervene, not only to expose Drew's deception but to help Willow break free from the toxic entanglement with Michael as well. With Willow and Michael's marriage in decline, marked by mutual distrust and the shadows of betrayal, Nina viewed this as a rare opportunity to reclaim her daughter's future and redefine what family could mean. She believed she could sever Willow's connection to Michael and redirect her away from Drew's manipulations. But everything shifted when she uncovered an even more explosive secret. Sasha was pregnant with Michael's child. That revelation threatened to detonate the entire custody case, to tilt the scales dramatically in favor of Willow if used strategically. But Nina, instead of arming her daughter with the truth, instead of using that information as leverage to protect her grandchildren from the chaos surrounding them, made the most devastating choice of all. She said nothing. The decision wasn't rooted in fear but rather in design. Nina understood that revealing Michael's paternity of Sasha's unborn child would cast him in a hypocritical light, a man fighting tooth and nail for custody of Wiley and Amelia while simultaneously aiding a secret family with another woman. The court of law and public opinion would not look kindly on such duplicity. Rick could use this information to destroy Michael's credibility, sway the judge, and ultimately secure full custody for Willow. But Nina, for reasons that even she refused to confront honestly, allowed Michael to remain protected. Whether it was remnants of emotional attachment, strategic alignment, or a deeply flawed sense of control, Nina allowed herself to become complicit in a scheme that betrayed everything she claimed to stand for. Her silence was not passive, it was weaponized. She became the guardian of a truth that could have set Willow free and instead used it to maintain the status quo, to prevent upheaval, and to silently orchestrate a future in which she believed she could maintain influence. The result was catastrophic. Michael, unencumbered by the explosive truth of his involvement with Sasha, sailed through the custody proceedings with a polished image of stability and dedication. The court, unaware of the hidden scandal, granted him full custody of Wiley and Amelia, leaving Willow not only devastated but stripped of her most sacred role, as a mother actively present in her children's lives. Worse still, the collapse of her personal life followed swiftly. The facade that Drew had maintained finally crumbled under the weight of scrutiny. His lies unraveled one after another. From the manipulated medical testimony to the withheld communications about Willow's journey to Germany, what had once seemed like noble intentions were revealed to be tactical maneuvers aimed at consolidating control. Willow's trust, already fragile, shattered. But perhaps the most painful realization came not from Drew's betrayal, but from Nina's. Discovering that her own mother had known everything, that she had held the key to reversing the court's decision and chose instead to protect Michael, sent Willow into a tailspin of grief, rage, and confusion. Nina's betrayal wasn't simply a moment of silence. It was the abandonment of a daughter when she needed her most. It was the erasure of maternal duty, the forfeiting of unconditional support in favor of political calculation. Willow was left to reckon not only with the legal loss of her children but also with the emotional devastation of knowing she had no true ally in the very person who had once promised to always fight for her. As the dust settled on the courtroom decisions and the truth about Drew's manipulations became public knowledge, Nina's role remained buried, at least for now. But guilt is not a quiet companion. It festers. It erodes. Nina could see the distance in Willow's eyes, the guardedness that had replaced warmth, the silence that had once been filled with trust and laughter. Even in victory, Michael could feel the fragility of what he had won, haunted by the knowledge that his deception, enabled by others, had cost more than anyone anticipated. And somewhere in Port Charles, Sasha carried not only the weight of a child but the burden of a secret that was never hers to keep, and never hers to tell. Her silence, too, had consequences. And the child she carried would one day grow into a symbol of all that had been broken and buried. The tragedy, then, was not just in what was done, but in what was knowingly left undone. In the hands not extended, the truths not spoken, the justice not sought. And for Willow, that realization, that the people she loved most had each played a part in her unraveling, was the wound that would never fully heal. Meanwhile, Michael, once seen as the likely loser in a bitter and chaotic legal battle, emerged as the unexpected victor, not through the strength of his character or the clarity of his arguments, but through the calculated silence of others. Nina's refusal to reveal the truth, coupled with Sasha's quiet compliance and Jason's continued participation in the paternity lie, created the perfect illusion for the court. Michael appeared as a dedicated, stable, and honest father, a man who prioritized the well-being of his children over personal chaos. The ambiguity surrounding the paternity of Sasha's unborn child became a hidden legal asset, an invisible shield that protected Michael from scrutiny. No one could produce irrefutable proof that Michael was leading a double life, and the carefully maintained deception preserved his image in front of the judge and jury. Ironically, the one woman who had the power to destroy Michael's case with a single admission was the very person who reinforced his victory, driven not by loyalty to him, but by her own fears, resentments, and personal agenda. Nina, entangled in her obsession to control the outcomes of the people around her, seemed to lose all sense of moral clarity. She no longer recognized the line between protecting her daughter and manipulating her fate. In her mind, allowing Michael to win custody meant creating a barrier between Willow and Drew, the man she so deeply despised. Nina convinced herself that this was the lesser evil, that in the long run, Willow would be better off separated from Drew, regardless of the emotional cost. But what she failed to anticipate was the irreversible damage her silence would cause. When the truth inevitably came to light, that Nina had sat on explosive information and chosen not to share it in the very moment her daughter needed her most, every remaining thread of their fragile relationship would snap. The rift that already existed between mother and daughter would widen into a chasm too vast to bridge. There are betrayals that are survivable, that can be softened by time or reconciled through apologies, but this was not one of them. For Willow, the knowledge that her own mother had withheld the one piece of truth that could have changed the entire outcome of the custody hearing felt like the ultimate abandonment. At the center of this tangled web was Sasha, unwitting, vulnerable, and deeply conflicted. She had never intended to be the catalyst for a courtroom war. Nor had she imagined her pregnancy would become the axis around which lives would unravel. She believed she was protecting Michael by keeping his secret, preserving his chances at fatherhood in the eyes of the court. But in doing so, she unwittingly contributed to the dismantling of another woman's future. Sasha was led to believe her silence was an act of compassion, when in truth it became a tool of devastation. She remained blissfully unaware that both Michael and Nina were using her condition as a silent weapon in their separate but equally destructive agendas. Michael, for his part, lived in constant turmoil. On the surface, he had won, gained full custody, emerged from the courtroom with his reputation intact, and secured a future with his children. But beneath that calm exterior, he was unraveling. Each day that passed without acknowledging the truth about Sasha's baby was another day spent deceiving the very people he claimed to protect. He had once believed that protecting Sasha's privacy was the noble choice, but the weight of that secret now threatened to crush the integrity he prided himself on. The temptation to come clean gnawed at him, but so did the fear of losing everything he had just regained. The prospect of Wiley and Amelia being taken away, of his parental rights being stripped due to the discovery of hidden paternity, was too great a risk. Even Jason, Michael's most trusted confidant and surrogate father figure, began to question the morality of their agreement. He had stood by Michael, maintained the paternity lie, and shielded Sasha from scrutiny because of a promise. But the situation had evolved far beyond a simple protective gesture. Jason watched as Willow's life fell apart. As Drew was publicly disgraced and children were shuffled like pieces on a legal chessboard, he began to question whether his loyalty had gone too far. Whether enabling this lie had turned him into a silent accomplice in the emotional dismantling of a family. The man who once stood as a pillar of honor now found himself caught in a labyrinth of ethical compromise, unsure which path could lead them back to redemption, if any path existed at all. As each player in this silent war wrestled with their choices, the true cost of deception came into focus. Nina's silence, though seemingly benign on the surface, was a calculated move that altered the course of multiple lives. Sasha's desire to protect was twisted into a mechanism of betrayal. Michael's fear of exposure led him to forsake transparency. And Jason's promise of support turned into a chain that bound him to moral ambiguity. And in the middle of it all stood Willow, stripped of her children, her trust shattered, her support system dismantled. She had been betrayed not only by the man she had once loved and the friend she had counted on, but by the mother who was supposed to be her advocate, her protector, her unwavering ally. The courtroom battle may have ended in Michael's legal victory, but the emotional battlefield told a different story, one of fractured relationships, decaying trust, and irreversible damage. And as the truth loomed ever closer, like a ticking time bomb threatening to explode, each person involved had to confront the inevitable question. What happens when the lies we tell to protect the people we love become the very things that destroy them? The truth, no matter how deeply buried, cannot remain hidden forever. It festers in silence, grows beneath the weight of denial, and waits for the inevitable moment when it can no longer be contained. And when that moment arrives, when the first cries of Sasha's newborn pierced the sterile air of Port Charles General Hospital, when the paternity tests are processed and filed into the hospital's database, or when Sasha, worn thin by guilt and overwhelmed by the pressure of carrying such a devastating secret, finally confesses the full extent of what she knows, the illusion so carefully crafted by lies and omissions will begin to shatter. The ripple effect will be immediate, and no one will be spared. The chain reaction that follows will not merely rewrite legal documents or shift custody agreements, it will redefine relationships, destroy reputations, and permanently stain the legacies of those who believed they could manipulate the truth to serve their own ends. And standing at the epicenter of this emotional earthquake will be Nina, who once believed that silence was a form of protection, that withholding the truth was an act of strategy rather than betrayal. But when that silence is exposed for what it truly is, a calculated decision to betray her daughter in the name of control, Nina will stand to lose everything. She will lose Willow, the daughter she fought so hard to reconnect with after years of estrangement. Any remaining threads of maternal trust will be severed beyond repair. Willow will see not just a mistake in judgment, but a deliberate betrayal, a mother who knew the truth and chose not to act when it mattered most. The bond they rebuilt, already strained, will collapse under the weight of shattered expectations and irreversible damage. Nina will also lose her place in the lives of her grandchildren. The very children she claimed to protect through her silence, Wiley and Amelia, will be emotionally shielded from her by a mother who no longer trusts her presence. Family events, milestones, and daily moments will become painful reminders of what Nina forfeited. She will become a ghost in the lives of those she once called family, not because she was exiled, but because she removed herself with every lie she allowed to stand. And more than anything, Nina will lose the image of herself that she has clung to for so long, the persona of a woman who makes hard choices for the greater good, who walks the line between flawed and fierce with conviction. That identity will crumble when her actions are exposed, revealing a woman driven not by love or protection, but by obsession, manipulation, and fear. She will be forced to confront the reality that she did not act as a mother or protector, but as a strategist in a war that demanded no casualties but created many. In the courtroom of public opinion and private heartbreak, victories are rarely clean, and the scales of justice are often weighed by unseen hands. Michael may have won custody, but that victory is poisoned, fragile and contingent upon a lie that will soon be exposed. Sasha, once complicit by default, may become the reluctant whistleblower who sets the reckoning in motion, forever changing the course of not just her own life, but the lives of everyone tied to this deception. Jason, who chose loyalty over transparency, will face the moral consequences of enabling a lie that devastated a woman he once swore to protect. But perhaps the most tragic element is that the person most deeply affected, the one who has lost not only legal rights but personal peace, is Willow. A woman who walked into a courtroom hoping for justice and walked out with nothing but silence from those she trusted most. She didn't just lose her children that day, she lost her mother, her partner, and her faith in the people around her. And when the truth finally rises, as it always does, it will be a vindication that comes too late. A justice that cannot restore what has already been broken. In the shadowy theater of courtrooms and whispered secrets, the ones who believe silence is safety are often the ones who fall the hardest. For silence is never neutral. It sides with the oppressor, it shelters the guilty, and it steals from the innocent the chance to fight back. Nina believed her silence gave her power. What she failed to understand was that it was a ticking time bomb, counting down to the moment when everything she thought she had under control would detonate, destroying not just her carefully crafted plans, but the very soul of the family she claimed to love. Because in the end, the courtroom's verdict may grant custody, but it cannot grant peace. And when the dust settles and the truth emerges, those who placed their trust in silence will find themselves surrounded not by victory, but by the wreckage of everything they tried to protect.